Mine are yours, and yours are mine.
But I like that title. It actually comes from the first part of the scripture we read today. And it reminds me of what I said last week about marriages, about relationships, like marriage, where when you get something, you have to remember what's yours is no longer yours, it's theirs, or his or hers. What's his or hers remains his or hers. And what you thought was ours really was his or hers. And so, I just kind of was thinking about that a little bit because I find that there's some wisdom in that. At least it pays to kind of remember that some days. And Sharon Hughes, before she left, sent me this email about what children think about marriage. And I thought, well, maybe we should ponder this a little bit, because today's scripture is really about relationship. And so I steal these from the email that Sharon sent me. How do you decide who to marry? No person really decides before they grow up. God decides it all way before. And you get to find out later who you're stuck with. That's from Kristen, age 10. What is the right age to get married? 23. Because you know the person forever by then. That's from Camille, who's also 10. How can a stranger tell if two people are married? This is from Derek, age 8. You might have to guess based on whether they seem to be yelling at the same kids. From Lori, age 8, her answer to, what do you think your parents have in common? Both don't want any more kids. What do most people do on a date? This is from Martin, who's 10. On the first date, they just tell each other lies, and that usually gets them interested enough to go for a second date. You're laughing because it was true for you. I know that. You're laughing because that was true for you. Think about those first dates, all the zillion you've had in life. You lied every time.
Zillion.
I did. This is from Pam, age 7, and Kurt, who's also 7. When is it okay to kiss someone? Pam says, when they're rich. And Kurt says, the law says you have to be 18, so I wouldn't want to mess with that. And finally, from Ricky, who's 10, how would you make a marriage work? Tell your wife she is pretty, even if she looks like a dump truck. Or your husband, I suppose. It doesn't really matter. But seriously, this passage, broken into 2 readings, is about relationship. And a very intimate, loving relationship. It kind of operates on more than one level. In one sense, it's Jesus talking about his relationship with Abba, God, who is his daddy. His daddy, not his father. How many called their father father? Anybody? What'd you call him? Dad. Pops, Papa, Poppy. Anything else? Do we do them all?
Oh, wait. Dada.
Dada?
Yep.
Dada? Dada? Is that the Texas way to say it?
No,
Dada?
it's just like dad with an A, but it's a Spanish thing.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought it was dad, like with
I always thought Poppy was the Spanish thing, so what do I know? Wasn't it
Different
Poppy?
Spanish.
I thought it was Poppy.
That's cute.
Different Spanish, okay, whatever. I don't know. Anyway, it's that kind of intimacy. The kind of intimacy that we had when we were little kids, whether it was with our dads or our moms or some other person who was that person for us, that we knew everything would be right if we told them and went running to them. and they would fix it all. Do you remember those days? And what's the other thing you know about your parents when you're 4 or 5 or 6? They're never going to die. And then they do. In some way, this operates as Jesus' last words to his disciples. Again, these readings that we have for these last weeks of Easter are from what we call in John's Gospel the farewell discourses. This takes place, this conversation with Jesus' disciples takes place on that Thursday night before what we call Good Friday. And so this is one of the last things he tells them. David Luce talks about this as the other Lord's Prayer, because a big part of this is Jesus talking to God about their relationship and the relationship Jesus now has with these disciples who have followed him, learned from him, and are about to lose him as their good friend. And so Jesus says in prayer, I have made your name known to those whom you gave me from the world. Do you know gave shows up, or give, given, giving, or gave, some form of give shows up 9 times? In this particular passage, we've excerpted it, so we have like 7 of them. And 75 times in the Gospel of John, the word give appears. You gave me them. God gave Jesus these folks who are so near and so dear to him. God gave Jesus these folks, we folk, who are so near and so dear to both of them. They were yours, and you gave them to me. And they have kept your word. To give something you love so much to somebody else. What an act of love. And we're not talking about stuff, right? We're not talking about stuff anymore. I don't know if anybody participated in our Advent series, but our Advent series back in November and December was about stuff. And how stuff sometimes gets in our way. And how we don't need so much stuff in our lives. If you've ever listened to George Carlin's old routines, you know more about that. I had a couple of conversations this week with the rabbi, who lost all the stuff in his apartment except for his dog and his wallet and the clothes he was wearing. He lost his grandfather's pocket watch. That's the one thing he kept telling me. He must have told me that 3 or 4 times. And every time he would talk to me about the stuff he had lost, he would say, Kath, but it's only stuff. It's only stuff. Even my grandfather's pocket watch. It's only stuff. Nobody can take a person from us. We can lose our stuff. We can lose it in the fire. We can lose it in a number of ways. Nobody can take the grandfather behind the watch from us. And so they were yours, and you gave them to me, and they have kept your word. Now they know that everything you have given me is from you. For the words that you gave to me, I have given to them. They have received them and know in truth that I came from you. Do we receive those words? Do we feel in our hearts, not just here in our heads, that Jesus is from God? This great gift given us so we might know how to do the hard things that life demands. Because that's what he did, will show us how to do that. But Jesus goes on, I am asking on their behalf. I'm not asking on behalf of the world, but on behalf of those you gave me, because they are yours. All mine are yours, and yours are mine. And I have been glorified in that. Did you wake up this morning feeling that God had been glorified in you? You wake up this morning feeling something else. But that's not how God feels about us. We can wake up cranky, or we can wake up happy. We can wake up dreading the day. We can wake up anticipating the day. But do we wake up believing that what we do, who we are, how we do what we do, will glorify God? What if we did believe that? What if we got up every day, looked in the mirror at those bloodshot eyes and that morning hair and said, God is telling me that God will be glorified in me today. That what I do, who I am, makes a difference. Let's try that tomorrow and see how that works. It's Monday, a scary day without that. Get up tomorrow and look in the mirror and say, God will be glorified. God is telling me that God will be glorified in who I am and what I do this day. You may not know that I'm part Irish. I'll share this Irish legend with you. I think it has something to say about this passage in relationship. According to legend, once there was a time in Ireland when it was ruled by a king who had no heir. And so the king sent out his couriers to post notices in all the towns of his realm, advising every qualified young man, because he was looking for a son, to apply for an interview with the king as a possible successor to the throne. I apologize for the sexism inherent in this tale, but I think it has its point. However, all such candidates must have these two qualifications. They must love God and their fellow human beings. A young man about whom this legend centers saw one of these notices and reflected to himself that he thought he loved God, and he also loved his neighbors. But one thing stopped him. He didn't have enough stuff. He was so poor that he had no clothes that would be presentable in the sight of the king, nor did he have the funds to buy provisions for the long journey to and from the castle. So the young man begged, finally managing to scrounge enough money for what he thought were the appropriate clothes and the necessary supplies. Properly attired, He set out on his quest and had almost completed it when he came upon a beggar by the side of the road. The beggar sat trembling, clad only in tattered rags. His extended arms pleaded for help, and his weak voice croaked, "I'm hungry and cold. Please help me. Please." The young man was so moved by the beggar's need that he immediately stripped off his new clothes and put on the tattered threads of the beggar. Without a second thought, he gave the beggar all his provisions as well. Then, somewhat hesitantly, he continued his journey to the castle, dressed in the rags of the beggar and lacking provisions for his return home. Arriving at the castle, the king's attendant showed him to a great hall, and then led him to the king. The young man bowed low before his majesty, and when he raised his eyes, he gaped in astonishment. "You are the beggar on the side of the road." "Yes, I was that beggar." "But you're really not a beggar. Why did you do that to me?" "Because I had to find out if you genuinely love God and your fellow human beings. I knew that if I came to you as a king, you would have been impressed by my gem-encrusted golden crown and my royal robes. You would have done anything I asked of you because of my regal character. But that way I would never have known what is truly in your heart, so I came to you as a beggar with no claims on you, except for the love in your heart. And I discovered that you truly love God and your fellow human beings." Being born in a manger, kind of beggar life. And then there's us. Who are we in this story? If you are the king, then I expect more than the offering plate today. But if you're that faithful, and I use this term loosely, young person who says, "You know what, I think I can be an heir to this one that asks only that I love God and other people," then I think we begin to get what part of this story means. Go back to Scripture. And Jesus says, "I am no longer in the world, but they are in the world." He's still praying for us. "And I am coming to you, Holy One. Protect them in your name that you have given me, so that they may be one as we are one." That intimate relationship of love shared between God and Jesus. Amazing. Without words I can find love. I love you so much. I give you to these other ones I love. I love them so much. I give them you. They are one as we are one. I could go off on the theology of the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are one, but I'm thinking you really could care so much. But that intimate relationship of love and dependence and interdependence and trust and knowing that when you go to that person, you are safe. that he or she will always make you feel safe. Think about all these children around our world whose countries are in strife, whose windows are rattled night after night after night by bombs exploding in their homes. Children stolen from their parents' arms to become boy soldiers in some countries, or to become child wives in other countries. Think about those children. Can we make their experience go away? No. We can't. What does Jesus pray? While I was with them, I protected them in your name that you have given me. I guarded them, and not one of them was lost except the one destined to be lost. But now I'm coming to you. And I speak these things in the world so that they may have my joy made complete. I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they do not belong to the world. Perhaps you've had that experience where you did something you felt called to do, and people around you looked at you with suspicion. I had the occasion recently to meet someone in Orlando, and a person wanted to meet at Disney World. Do you know what it's like to be a single person getting on a tram full of families with children? And you don't have any? And you don't have any evidence of having any? Do you know how lonesome that can feel? When everybody's looking at you like, why are you here? Or to be sitting, waiting, and a little boy, maybe 5 or 6, with tears welling up in his eyes, and a quivering lip. I'm not making this up. Walks by you because he's lost. And the woman sitting next to you with the baby stroller in front of her says, I bet he's lost. But she's got a baby that she's caring for, so she doesn't try to help him. But the single person with no children in sight, knowing that this is a precarious situation to be in, cannot let the child continue to wander alone in fear and in tears. And so very gingerly approaches the child and says, have you lost your mommy? No answer, just a tear. What do I do now? I said, without touching him, why don't we go over there to that nice man in his uniform? He's supposed to help us find our mommies. One step. Why don't we go over to the nice man over there in the uniform? He's safe, and he's supposed to help us find our mommies. About the 4th or 5th time, the bigger brother came along and said, oh, there he is, he's mine, and he grabs him, and I thought, oh, thank you, God. Or as Julian would say, thank you, Jesus. But what do? We continually and continuously put ourselves in the position, because we're Christian, because we belong to God, because we think we belong to one another, that we try to take care of the lost, even to our own detriment. I will say this. Later that day, when I got on the tram, I was the only one that sat on my seat. No one sat with me, so I could just lounge out. But we do these things because we're called to do them. And we do them as carefully and as safely and tenderly as we can for somebody who's lost and vulnerable. Because what if I hadn't done that? What if I hadn't kind of just shepherded him toward the nice man in the uniform? What if somebody else had come along and taken him by the hand and taken him someplace else? We're called to do these things, and the world doesn't trust us. Jesus goes on in this scripture and says, I am not asking you to take them out of the world, but I ask you to protect them from evil, or in some translations, from the evil one. Jesus doesn't say to God, fix everything. I want you to fix everything for them. I don't want them to feel any more pain. I don't want them to feel lost. I don't want them to feel bad. I want everything fixed, he doesn't say. I mean, he came, and he knows what the human condition is like. And it's not a pretty condition some days. But he said, just protect them from evil. Just protect them from the evil one. So that they don't become evil like that one. Maybe that's all. We can know that God is there with us, protecting us. Maybe just from becoming evil like those that are evil to us and to others. Sanctify them in the truth. As you sent me into the world, so I have sent them. And for their sakes I sanctify myself, so that they also may be sanctified. Commentators tell us that the Greek word used in this passage for sanctify is the same word used in the other Lord's Prayer. The one that says, hallowed be your name, the word for hallowed, and the word for sanctified is the same word used in Scripture. Make these folks holy. Help them be holy. Make them holy. And how do you do that? I have a story. I spent the week before my daughter's wedding running last-minute trips to the caterer, the florist, the tuxedo shop, and the church about 40 miles away. So many details in so little time. To save money, though, I decided I would ask my neighbors for magnolias from their trees with which to decorate the church for the wedding. After the rehearsal dinner the night before, we filled the podium area and parlor loft with magnolias. As we left just before midnight, I was tired but satisfied. This would be the best wedding any bride ever had. The big day arrived, and I walked into the sanctuary to do a final check. When I opened the door, I felt a rush of hot air, and then I saw them. All the beautiful white flowers were black.